If you ever said, damn, this world is chaotic, well, you're right. And also, welcome to the global tour of groups who took bad life choices and turned it into a lifelong hobby. The Jihadist Militant Spotlight, when extremism meets global ambitions. Let's start off with ISIS. I like to call this one the Caliphate project gone horribly wrong. The Islamic State didn't just want a country. No, they wanted that and a whole medieval-style empire, complete with strict laws and propaganda videos. Their core objective? To establish a global caliphate, a state under ultra-rigid interpretation of Islam. For a few years, they actually held a massive territory across Iraq and Syria. Today, after heavy international military pressure, they operate mostly as scattered cells, but still cling to the same dream: rebuild, recruit, and what? Yeah, terrorize. Al-Qaeda. Looks like we stumbled on the original franchise model. Before ISIS invented their terrible brand marketing, Al-Qaeda was already running a multinational militant corporation. Their goal that drove them to do the stuff that they did? Drive Western influence out of the Muslim world, overthrow local government they deem un-Islamic, and create a unified Islamic realm. They became globally infamous after the 9/11 attacks and continue to function through regional affiliates like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Sure, they're not as flashy as ISIS, they're patient. Their entire strategy is basically wait, plan, and occasionally ruin global peace. Taliban. Well, if it isn't the "we only want Afghanistan" extremists. Unlike ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the Taliban keeps their ambitions local. They want Afghanistan under a strict interpretation of Islamic law, and, well, they succeeded in 2021. Their goal had always been control over Afghanistan politics, society, and way of life. The dark humor writes itself. They considered themselves liberators, while millions of Afghans considered them why 2021 felt like a bad dream. Boko Haram. What makes this particular group stand out is their hate for books. Based in Nigeria and surrounding regions, Boko Haram's name roughly translates to "Western education is forbidden," which tells you everything. Their goal is to replace Nigeria's secular government with an Islamic state and eliminate Western influence from society, specifically through acts of violence and kidnapping. They later pledged allegiance to ISIS, forming ISIS West Africa province, because apparently regular extremism wasn't extreme enough. Hamas. The one with dual identities. Hamas is a hybrid, a mix of part political party and part militant organization. Their stated goal is the liberation of Palestine from Israeli occupation and the establishment of an Islamic Palestinian state. They run Gaza's administration while simultaneously engaging in armed conflict with Israel. In other words, they're both the government and the armed group, depending on which day of the week you're observing. Hezbollah. Backed by Iran, Hezbollah is both a political party and one of the Middle East's most powerful armed groups. Their goal includes resisting Israeli presence, expanding Iranian influence, and maintaining dominance in Lebanese politics. They have deep military capabilities, not your everyday neighborhood militia. Their level of organization makes some countries' actual armies look underfunded. Scary. Now let's talk about nationalist and separatist groups. The Provisional IRA. Welcome to the long fight for Irish unification. The Provisional Irish Republican Army wanted Northern Ireland free from British rule and united with the Republic of Ireland. Their strategy involved bombings, assassinations, sabotage during what would become known as the Troubles. And I'd like to point out what an understatement that was. Their campaign ended with the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, but splinter groups remain. Their entire conflict was essentially, give us independence or we'll make your life spectacularly inconvenient. And boy, they sure did. The Tamil Tigers, the quest for Tamil Eelam. Sri Lanka's Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam were one of the most organized separatist groups in history. Their goal was to carve out an independent Tamil homeland in the north and east of Sri Lanka. They pioneered the use of suicide bombers and maintained a navy and even a small air force. All for what? All because apparently being a terrorist group wasn't ambitious enough. Thankfully, they were defeated in 2009 after a brutal civil war. ETA. What better way to Basque Independence than with explosives, says the ETA. They operated in Spain and France, and demanded an independent Basque state. For decades, they carried out bombings and assassinations aimed at Spanish government officials. Their official ceasefire in 2011 and disbandment in 2018 ended one of Europe's longest-running separatist conflicts, and thank God it did. Their slogan might as well be "Freedom first, diplomacy never." PKK. Blend Kurdish nationalism with armed struggle, and you have the Kurdistan Workers' Party. They began as a Marxist movement seeking an independent Kurdish state across Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Today, they focus more on political autonomy for Kurds, but still maintain an armed wing. Turkey designates them as a terrorist organization. Kurds see them as defenders. The truth, like always, sits in the uncomfortable middle. Now let's talk about the far right and white supremacist extremists, ideology with a side of hate. The Ku Klux Klan, or better named, America's oldest hate club. Formed after the US Civil War, the KKK is basically racism turned into some sort of cosplay. Their goals? Preserve white supremacy, oppose civil rights for Black Americans, and maintain a society structured around racial hierarchy. At their peak, millions were involved. Today, they're fragmented and irrelevant, yet somehow refuse to fully disperse. Explains why racism is still very much everywhere. Combat 18 and the Atomwaffen Division. Combat 18 in the UK and the Atomwaffen Division in the US are some of the best examples of modern far-right extremist groups that revolve around white supremacy, accelerationism, and the belief that society should collapse so they can rebuild it in their preferred image. Spoiler, it's a terrible image. Their goals aren't just racist, as if that wasn't enough. Oh no, they actively seek chaos and strongly believe violence will spark a larger racial war. The far-left revolutionaries. Here's a bit of communism with explosives for a change. Enter the far-left militant groups, the guys who look at capitalism and immediately want to replace it with a communist revolution. Instead of elections or peaceful activism, they choose the more dramatic route of bombings, kidnappings, and armed insurgencies. To them, destroying the current system isn't just a goal, it's a full-time job, considering how crazily dedicated they were. Shining Path. Next we have Peru's hardcore Maoist revolution. Shining Path is one of the most violent Maoist insurgencies ever recorded. Their goal was too complicated: overthrow the Peruvian government and rebuild the country using an extreme interpretation of Maoist communism. They believed violence was not just necessary, but noble, and they targeted anyone who didn't fall in line. The result? Only a brutal internal conflict that left Peru shaken for decades. FARC. Ever heard of Colombia's largest running insurgency? The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia fought for more than 50 years in the name of Marxist-Leninist revolution. They focused mainly on things like land reform, rural empowerment, and dismantling capitalist structures. Over the years, their insurgency made a shift. And you'd hope for the better, but no. They shifted into kidnapping, extortion, and participation in the cocaine trade. Despite that, their ideological objective remained pretty much the same: replace Colombia's government with a leftist revolutionary state. Red Brigades. The Red Brigades operated mainly in the 1970s and 80s, determined to overthrow Italy's political system and install a communist regime. Their tactics? The usual: assassinating politicians, kidnapping high-profile figures, and attacking institutions they believe upheld capitalism. Their most popular act, though, was the kidnapping and murder of former Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro. Their goal was total revolution, and they pursued it with ruthless precision. Red Army Faction. The Red Army Faction believed West Germany was corrupted by capitalism and American influence. Their objective was to dismantle what they considered a fascist state and rebuild it along communist principles. They thought it would be great to carry out a bunch of bombings, bank robberies, and targeted assassinations. They framed their violence as resistance, imagining themselves as the spark that would ignite a larger revolution. Japanese Red Army. The Japanese Red Army didn't settle for a national revolution. They wanted it worldwide. All they lived for was to trigger a global anti-imperialist uprising, partnering with militant groups in the Middle East and carrying out international attacks, including hijackings and coordinated assaults. They had this whole ideology centered on worldwide communist revolution, and they worked across not just countries, but continents to make it happen. Now let's talk about religious militants with apocalyptic or extreme doctrines. because then there were some of those groups that operate entirely outside political boundaries, blending religion with violent interpretations that led to devastating campaigns. Their objectives tend to revolve around divine missions, prophecies, or extreme protectionism. Take Lord's Resistance Army, for example. The group, led by Joseph Kony, claimed to fight for a society based on the Ten Commandments and spiritual guidance. In reality, their campaign was defined by mass abductions, child soldiers, and brutal, we mean horrific, attack on civilians. Kony's stated goal set for himself was creating a theocratic state shaped around his own personal religious visions. And let's just say that his visions had little to do with peace and everything to do with domination. Jewish Defense League. The Jewish Defense League formed with the intention of protecting Jewish communities from anti-Semitism, but certain factions escalated into extremist violence. Their goal was less confronting and mostly attacking individuals or groups they believed threatened Jewish people. Their actions crossed the line early enough into terrorism when they targeted perceived enemies through violent means rather than defense or political advocacy. Whew, that's enough terrorism for today, folks. What are your thoughts on these groups? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you leave. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.